Hi, this is Lauren from 10 Directions, and I'm pleased to introduce this teaching conversation with Diane Musho Hamilton. This conversation gives you a taste of what Diane will be teaching in our upcoming online training, In This Together, Communication Wisdom for the World of Work. For more information, visit www.theschoolofhumanbeing.com/welcome. In this conversation, Diane and I talk about how to have challenging conflict conversations. You'll learn how to prepare yourself before a difficult conversation, how you can respond when tension rises, and the importance of staying in relationship even in the most heated moments. Hi, Diane.
Hi, Lauren.
Thanks for having this conversation with me. So I want to learn from you about conflict, or more specifically, like challenging conversations that can feel like conflict to me or to anyone else. And I know you've done a lot of work in conflict resolution. So I guess my first question is, what's wrong with avoiding it?
I don't think there's anything wrong with avoiding it. I think it's a tried and true method, and I think people who are skillful at avoiding it experience a lot of kind of peace. The downside of avoidance, of course, is when something needs to be dealt with. And then because you haven't practiced, it's really threatening to actually bring something up, so you get back into the habit of avoiding it, and that thing that needs to be talked through or resolved or addressed doesn't happen. And so, obviously, the upside of avoidance is simply allowing things to be, and not, letting sleeping dog lie, not stirring the pot, that kind of thing. But in the moment when the pot needs a stir, you won't have the skill set to do it. That's the downside.
Okay, fair enough. I'm with you on that.
Okay, so you kind of limit your repertoire of responses.
Yeah, I hear that. So let's say I'm then willing and preparing to head into a challenging conversation. Is there anything that I can do on my own before I begin that would support me?
Well, we talked a little bit earlier in our conversation about the nature of the sympathetic nervous system and the old hard wiring that we have when we experience threat and what happens in the body. And I think that what we need to do is to realize that anytime we experience threat, if we really pay attention, even though we may have a very rational coping mode or an avoidance coping mode or a mode of just getting on task, whatever it is, when you really let yourself feel the threat, you can feel the adrenaline in your body, you can feel your heart rate increase, you can feel the heat in your neck, you can feel your jaw tighten, you can feel your shoulders clench, you can feel a nausea in your belly. Like that is all evidence that the fight or flight system is alive and well, that the amygdala is firing, that adrenaline is being secreted, that you're probably, if it continues, going to start experiencing some cortisol, that the stress hormones in the body don't feel good. Mm-hmm. So if you're going out of your comfort zone and you're moving into a relationship with someone else where you're going to talk about things that are challenging, you can expect to feel discomfort in the body. That is just the way it is. That's just the way it is. I've been doing this for years, and when I feel attacked, threatened, challenged in certain ways, I just feel my heart start to thump. Mm-hmm. And I have that kind of reaction of wanting to defend myself. So it's very important not to expect that you're going to go in to a conversation like that and feel completely serene. Now, granted, the more you do it, the better it gets. That's just true. But just don't imagine that your sensations in your body are going to feel good.
Okay.
They're going to be challenging.
Right. Okay. That's sort of freeing as well, to just let it be challenging.
Yeah, that's right. You can always use the breath to help regulate a little bit. Just some nice, steady inhales and exhales will help, of course. They always do. But sometimes you just persevere in spite of the fact that it's awkward. And keep in mind, if you were learning to ski, it's awkward. If you're learning to play piano, it's awkward. It's always awkward. So just expect that.
Yeah. Okay, so sort of, would you mind leading me in? Like, is there a better way to start a difficult conversation with somebody or to initiate it?
Yeah, I think that, again, it depends. I think there are cultural and gender differences, how much you disclose about your own feeling at the moment, but kind of making yourself a little bit vulnerable in that you would like to have a conversation about something that's, has been maybe bothering you, or I might want to have a conversation. I'm not really very good at it, so I'm going to take a risk here. Mm-hmm. And I notice that I feel challenged around this issue at work. A question is really often very, very helpful. So I feel challenged, just a little bit of a bit. It's going to excite the conversation a bit. And then what's happening for you? So beginning with a question as a way of opening it up, and then really practicing your listening skills and really being for the other while you're listening, and really finding a way to legitimize their experience. Now, their adrenaline may have also started to increase, so you might feel their heart rate increase, and then that makes you feel more nervous. And so when they're nervous, just also appreciate for a moment that it's not something they're used to doing either. And sometimes they can feel a little bit attacking, and then you're like off to the races. Mm-hmm. But can you excite the system a little bit and then be the person who does the receiving, who sets the pace? No, it's okay. We can actually talk about these things. We don't have to panic. So those would be some cues.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. I can already feel the difference of asking a question to start. Yeah. So you said we're off to the races. Like, what happens? Like, there we go. We're going down the river, and I'm getting pissed. Mm-hmm. Clearly, they are not happy either. What can I do short of like cutting the conversation off?
Cutting the conversation off is fine. Doing what we always do is fine. People who avoid or who accommodate, as opposed to those who confront and challenge, tend to be liked a little bit better at work. So there's nothing wrong with that. You lose respect if you do it too often. You don't challenge once in a while. People don't have the same level of respect. If you challenge too much, they don't feel at ease. So these are all trade-offs. As we've said, it's art to be able to do this kind of thing. I would say if somebody's getting mad, I would just sort of notice, like, I'm getting mad. And I think there's a truth or there's a perspective I want to deliver, and I want it to be heard, and you must want the same thing. Is there any way that we could just locate a truth and I'll listen to you and you listen to me? Would that be possible? So maybe kind of you also become like a little bit of a facilitator. Here's what I'm noticing. Here's what I would like. Would you like that also? Let's just give each other an opportunity to say what's true. And notice that we both feel attacked and we both feel angry. Mm-hmm. So you're modulating the experience.
Yeah.
As a neutral.
Yeah, totally.
That's kind of an advanced technique there.
Yeah. And of course, I think probably everybody has this experience, but I'm now thinking of situations where I think I'm working really hard at those types of skills, and the other person is like flying off the handle. And I find it hard to know what to do. Like, what do you do in that type of a situation? Well,
intention is something that we haven't really talked about, but we always have to be clear what our intention is. And what I'm hearing you say is that your intention is to actually develop a skill set. And if you're going to develop a skill set, you need some ground rules. And one of the ground rules is that, and this is one that Lloyd Fickett shared with me that I think is really, really helpful from his collaborative way work, and that is that we need to be for each other. And it's really hard to remember to be for someone when what they're saying doesn't correspond with what my view is, and when what they're saying is critical of me. It's very hard for me to remember that. Mm-hmm. But if I can remember that, that will go a long way in just changing the tone. So being able to remember that we're for each other, being willing to listen to a perspective that doesn't agree to my own, and then basically asking the other person to hear a truth that I have to offer, standing up for myself, is also really important. So those are three things that can be really, really helpful. And walking away, if it just looks unproductive, is okay. Sometimes it's just they're not the person that we're going to be able to practice with, or this relationship isn't the one in which I can really work with these skills. There's always going to be a great variation in terms of people's willingness, their skill set, their own curiosity, and we can't lay our trip on everybody that because I want to have a certain kind of conversation, you therefore, must as well. It's just not true.
Mm-hmm. Can you double click a little bit on this the being for each other? Because I kind of feel like I get it, but then I'm wondering in the moment, like you said, when it's so hard, is there anything that you do to help yourself continue to be for that person?
Well, I'm going to assume that I wouldn't be in relationship with people trying to have a conversation if there wasn't some part of me that really appreciated them. But when I'm under stress, when my amygdala is firing, when I'm being given negative feedback, when I'm mad at somebody for, some misstep or miscommunication, it's amazing how much the body feels not okay, and therefore the mind follows that. So things are not okay, you're not okay. Mm-hmm. So a little cognitive reminder of like, oh, I look at Lauren and I see Lauren and we have so many years of working together, and in this moment she's really driving me crazy. But, I remember that I like her, I like you. Like it's really a cognitive thing to have to do, and then it kind of can open the heart a little bit, and then it becomes more embodied. Like, yeah, I actually love you, I actually care about you. So it's almost like a mental reminder is something that I work on. Yeah. It's just reminding myself. All right.
Yeah.
Am I for this person? Yes, totally.
Okay, so not to take this down so many different roads, but what if it's like a work situation where maybe this is not a friend, maybe this is somebody I've got to work with and I've got to figure it out, and they're a pain in my routine.
So that's a great truth. It could be something as simple as you and I have to work together, and I think we both agree we don't have to become BFF, best friends. But so what do you think about this? What is it that's going to happen that can help us get this project done? You just turn your attention to the doing. It's not about the relationship. And that's good too. There's so many different ways to go about it.
So am I still for them, or am I sort of letting myself off the hook on that one?
Well, you're definitely for them insofar as your success relies on them. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. You're for them in a work context. You're for them in terms of delivery. You're for them in terms of execution.
Okay.
Are you for them in terms of intimacy? Are you for them in terms of your deepest held values? Are you for them in terms of, being present to one another's pain? No. But are you for them as a person you're working? You damn well better be, or you're not going to have success.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just think about it as team play. If you're a member of a football team, you don't love everyone the same, but you're for each other for the duration.
Yeah.
And what doesn't work if you're not?
So this is really helpful. I'm imagining all the different challenging conversations I've had.
And right.
One thing that can be really difficult, I think, for a lot of people is if the person that they're talking to is coming on really strong and maybe giving them feedback, or maybe there's accusations, or there's just a heaviness. You can feel like you're on your back foot and not know how to regain your ground.
Yeah, totally. My son has a very interesting thing he does whenever I get really intense, because I'm hot-headed, is he'll say to me, easy windmill, easy. There's something about when he does that, it just cracks me up. So, easy windmill, take it easy, we can work on this. Or, I care a lot about what you're saying, but if you don't take it down a notch, there isn't a chance I'm going to be able to listen to you. It's a little more challenging, right? I totally care about what's happening here, care about you, care about your perception, but you can't lay all that into me, because it just makes me incredibly anxious.
Wow, that's really clear.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm noticing is you're being caring and challenging at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that really important to be able to do those two things at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely, because the care is what keeps you in relationship, and the challenge is what changes it so you can stay in a relationship. If we don't modulate ourselves, we just drive each other away. And if we don't risk enough, we don't have any energy in our relationships. It's like you just want always the right amount of heat, the right amount of excitement in a system. Otherwise, it's boring. If we don't ever challenge each other, it's boring. I mean, there's no creativity when we're all sitting around, making sure that everybody feels good all the time. It's not about that. It's about authenticity, it's about enlivenment, it's about creativity, it's about risk, it's about all those things. It's not simply about safety and feeling, sometimes I think that gets overemphasized in relationship, and then there's a stagnation kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would imagine if I'm in a dynamic with somebody I'm working with, I'm realizing I care about the reverse, which is maybe I'm coming on too strong, and they're like, "Whoa!" Is there anything that is a good way for someone to check that in the moment? Like maybe it hits them like, "Whoa, maybe I'm coming on too strong, and this person isn't saying anything."
Yeah, well, I would just say, remember my old thing: if a third person says, "Get yourself," you're being a horse's ass, get yourself a saddle. If you have the sense that you might be coming on too strong, you might want to just either tone it down or ask, "Is this too much? Am I too intense? How are you experiencing me?" So the minute you have that insight, I would suggest acting on it for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. So the other question I have for you is when I'm in a situation with someone who maybe has more power over me, especially if it's a work environment, and like, how does all this change? Like, does it change? Can I still practice all these things we've just been talking about, or are there certain things that are left unsaid, or?
Well, I would just say if someone's in a role in which they have more authority and therefore they're wielding more power, or if someone is just naturally more charismatic, or if someone has more emotional depth or more have worked on their communication, I mean, what kind of power are we talking about? There are many, many different sources of power. If we're talking about authority, then yes, you adapt. If you're in relationship to someone who's your boss, you've made an agreement by simply coming to work for them that you're willing to adapt your preferences to take their direction. That's implicit. Now, there's a weakness in that we don't often make that explicit with each other, but if there is, then it definitely needs to be acknowledged, at least in your own mind. Like, this is my boss, and my boss ultimately wants me to execute on their behalf for the vision of the whole. And so I need to say, at least notice that. I might say something like, "Listen, I work for you. Right? I'm going to do what it is that you expect of me and what you want from me. Having said that, are you open to some feedback, or would you be interested in another perspective, or is there a way that I could share something about the stress this is causing for me?" So just acknowledging it, lots of times will just open the space up to allow for it.
Okay.
Depending on who your boss is and how dense he or she is, or how great their skill set is, you're going to get a different response. But whenever I'm in a relationship with an authority, a superior in the workplace, I understand that my job is to yield. Ultimately. Maybe not always, but ultimately. That's why we're positioned the way we are.
Mm-hmm. And if we're in a more, collaborative, lateral type of relationship, then what we're doing is trying to stay in relationship because of the function we're there to perform.
Totally. So being aware of role, being aware of shared intention, being aware of whatever the execution expectations are, those things all determine how we relate to each other. Everybody knows when you're under pressure, all the communication goes to hell because everybody's organized towards the goal. So what happens for me as I talk about these things is I do want to share, and I do want to be helpful and supportive to other people's learning. And at the same time, I also want to say that, there are lots of fails in the course of a day. There are lots of times that I don't like how I was, or felt I could have done something better or different. And that it's not an absolute, in the same way that, if you have extremely good health care, you're still going to get ill, right? You're still going to face death. This is not an absolute solution, but it is a way of experiencing more freedom in your life with people.
Yeah.
And it's a developmental hallmark. People get more and more curious about different points of view. People get more and more adept at expressing emotion. People become more able to deal with tension in a creative process. Those are all things that can be developed.
Yeah. Okay, so to close, my last question is, sometimes when you're working with people, there's a person that you can't have the challenging conversation with. Maybe they're not willing, or they're not somehow able. And so there's a sort of unsatisfying, like I've had this experience where I just felt like I could never really fully resolve the difficulty with this one person. And I just wondered if you had any suggestions for how to get at peace with that, or let it go, when you can't deal with it.
Yeah, so I would say rather than attempting to resolve it with the person, you just shift it, instead resolve it within yourself. So this is how it is between the two of us. Can I live with that? Am I okay with that? Is there anything I need to do differently if this is an unresolvable? There's a nice old Sufi story about a gardener who goes to a master because he's having problems with weeds, and the master suggests some sort of different watering regimen. So the gardener goes back and tries the different watering, and it doesn't help. So then he goes to the master, she, again, and asks for more advice, and he suggests some sort of rearranging of plants or planting a new plant in there to get rid of these particular weeds. Doesn't work at all. Gardener goes back to the master exasperated. Didn't work. What should I do? He said, well, I suggest you learn to love them. So there's always that option. This is just how it is. So.
Thank you. I really appreciate this. We hope you enjoyed this conversation and learned something new about your own communication skills. If you're curious to go deeper, we invite you to take a closer look at Diane's new online training, In This Together, Communication Wisdom for the World of Work. To learn more about the training, visit www.theschoolofhumanbeing.com/welcome.